Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, Zerilli-Marimò. We're very fortunate to have here tonight with Fred, Maestro Gianandrea Noseda. As you know, this series is the longest lasting series in the history of the Casa. 8, 9 years, 10. We lost count of how many years. There was COVID in between, and then we returned. And maybe you should know that the idea of having such a series started with a sit-down like this between Fred and Maestro Noseda many years ago. And this is the third time for Maestro Noseda to be here at the Casa. And we are delighted that he's here. We love to be in the audience when he conducts the orchestra. It's a pleasure for the soul. And when he speaks, it's a pleasure of the mind. So you're in for a treat. And we are thrilled to have him back with his wife, Lucia, who honors us with her presence here tonight. And Fred, as you know, I always have the duty, the task, when I introduce him, to say something new about Fred. Difficult because, you know, he has been on the stage almost as often as I've been. But just a good piece of good news, his book that he wrote last year about the cuisine of Italy with Rick Stevens is on the top of the sales for that kind of book. So if you haven't bought it yet, buy it. Give it as a Christmas present. It's great. It talks about Italian food. What is there not to like, right? But tonight we're going to talk about music. We're going to talk about great music. Please welcome Fred Plotkin and Maestro Gianandrea Noseda.
So I want to review a little history with all of you. Welcome, and those of you listening at home. When I met Gianandrea Noseda in 2002, we were introduced by Lydia Bastianich, the great chef. You know her from television. She will be here in this chair on April 30th talking about music. And Gianandrea and I instantly became friends also with his wife, Lucia. And it was a very quick friendship. You know, we who work in opera, we have colleagues, we know people, and we say, you know, we know each other. But not everybody is a friend. It's a word that I use very sparingly and only when I really mean it. But this is a friendship, so you'll have to understand tonight that we're speaking as friends. And we did some research. It was kind of like going into a tomb in Egypt to find the ancient archives of the Casa Italiana. And February 21st, 2006, we had a conversation called A Modern Italian Maestro. And then December 11th, 2007, The Life and Art of Giuseppe Verdi. At that time, there was no streaming. There was no video recording. For the first one, there was not even audio recording. And I realized that we had no documentation of Gianandrea Noseda at the Casa Italiana. And I had to bring you back. But I do have memories of that night. I remember that one of the first things we did was we had the audience correctly pronounce his name. Because now we all can say Gianandrea Noseda without a problem, but you remember people said Noseda and things like that. And I felt it was important that everyone know his name because he was already doing great work back then. And those of us who knew him and admired him, not as a friend, but as people who love music, understood that he was going to go on to do many great things. And you've done even more many great things than we understood that you would do. And so we're going to talk about some of that tonight. We're going to talk about music. We're going to watch a little video. We're going to listen to some recordings. The program, as you know, is called Adventures in Italian Opera. We are going to go away from Italy occasionally tonight, but there'll always be a link. So officially welcome my friend, Gianandrea Noseda.
Grazie, Fred.
Julian, play number 1, please. Video play.
Music is a very natural language in my life. We had the upright piano. You always start going there just slapping on the keyboard. If you go in this part of the keyboard, the sound is very high, the encoder is very low. After that, you try to combine two sounds. You start to experience the differences between the combination of the sounds. I learned the notes before I learned the letters of the alphabet. My father is an amateur chorus master. I was taken by him in many rehearsals, and what was fascinating at that stage when I was 3 or 4 years old was to see my father provoking a sound from other people. I tried to do at home, but nothing happened, so immediately I realized if I wave my hands, I need someone who reacts to me.
So you may have noticed, and Julian, set up number 2, please. You may have noticed that this video was made by the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington, D.C. When you were here and all the times that we've spoken and eaten together in Europe and the United States, we spoke about different orchestras you've worked at in Russia, in Italy, in other countries, in England primarily. And it never crossed my mind, it certainly crossed my mind that you would work in an American orchestra. The National Symphony Orchestra in Washington never crossed my mind, which is not a judgment of that orchestra. It's just that we often talk about the so-called Big Five, which is a fallacy, but of Boston, Cleveland, Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia. But people quickly say, but there's also Los Angeles, and there's also San Francisco, and you can name Atlanta for choral work. And people would say, and yes, there's the National Symphony. But the National Symphony, for those of us who know, c'è un posto qua giù. For those of us who know, it's part of the Kennedy Center. The Kennedy Center is this big institution, really the only rival in America for Lincoln Center. And I've worked a lot at the Kennedy Center through the years, and I love it. It has a different feeling from Lincoln Center. It's a federal government institution. It sits on the Potomac River near the Saudi Arabian embassy, near Georgetown, and so on. And for those, and the Watergate Hotel. And for those of us who know Washington and like Washington as I do, it was there, but it has a very different feeling. And I always felt that the National Symphony Orchestra was potential rather than realization. Now, and not because you're my friend, it's a famously fabulous orchestra. It is. It has a great reputation now, and certainly ranks among the others that I've spoken about. And I can say this because I know this, that a lot of it is down to your effort. And so when did you arrive at the National Symphony, and what did you see that had to be done, and how did you form this relationship?
My first week with the National Symphony Orchestra was back in 2011. I was just invited as a guest conductor. And I remember the program because in the first half I had Radu Lupu as a soloist playing Beethoven Piano Concerto No. 3. And in the second half, I conducted Manfred Symphony by Tchaikovsky. And I remember that the orchestra immediately reacted to my body language pretty well. We found immediately a syntony, a chemistry in communication. And I remember a good concerts, a series of good concerts. And especially what was very positive in that week was the positive remark that Radu Lupu, for me a myth, an iconic figure in the piano world, was telling me about, but you understand Beethoven. I said, oh, wow, thank you. You understand Beethoven, said by him had a special meaning. After that, okay, I left good memories, hopefully. But I was re-invited in November October, November 2015. And that was my second week with them. And I knew that they were looking for the successor of Christoph Eschenbach, Maestro Eschenbach. I knew that because I was conducting in Salzburg that summer Trovatore, and I was invited by one person, Ronald Abramson, to have a coffee. And being an Italian, to have a coffee means you go to the bar, you order without sitting a coffee, you drink an espresso, ciao ciao, bye bye, arrivederci, fantastic. For me, that was a coffee. I mean, it's not the kind of things that you sit, you order to eat, and maybe the second coffee, what kind of coffee. And that surprised me because we sat down, and okay, espresso, he sat also there. And I had the impression that I was going through an interview. But not a picky one, but very digging inside. I said, oh, okay. And after that, I remember that at the end of this conversation, I had 4 espressos, which is a lot of caffeine. And I hope that the level of my answers increased with the level of the caffeine in my blood. And that was the end of the story. He came with other people to attend the Trovatore, and I know that. But that is what I discovered much later, that they went back to Washington. He was the chairman for the research committee for the conductor, for the successor, for the music director. And that is the story. I went there in October with a very good program with Prokofiev's second violin concerto with James Ennis, the Canadian violinist, and the second half was Rachmaninoff's Symphony No. 2. I remember that after the first rehearsal, Deborah Rutter, the president of the Kennedy Center, invited me out for lunch. And you try to put all these elements out there, this one. At the end, the day after the last concert, on Saturday, I had to go to Philadelphia to conduct the subscription week the following week. And I had the car in the morning, but I had to postpone the car because Roger Sant and Ginny Roish, at the time in the board, they invited me for a brunch. I said, I'll say brunch, lunch, let's see, because I got used to the different length of events. If the coffee took 2 hours, the brunch I will finish in the evening. But actually it was a normal brunch, and in the next week, we didn't, I was probably Thursday or Friday, after that Sunday, that I got the invitation to become music director in the National Symphony Orchestra. So was 1 year, the 16 was music director designate, which is something that in Europe we don't use designate, because you are not there yet, but you are already there. But you cannot make decisions, so you cannot attend auditions to hire people, but they are waiting for you, designated. There is a sense of expectation, which I like, anticipation, which is good. And that's it. And incredibly enough, the quality, the potential of the orchestra was already there. But somehow, what I felt, they needed a bit of fire, a bit of motivation, somehow. And apparently, I could provide this fire.
So, on my side of this equation, I think Deborah Rutter is brilliant. I think she's one of the best arts managers anywhere. And I spoke to her about the fact that I was very happy that they invited Gianandrea, that we're friends, and that therefore, to me, it was a good thing. And she said to me, we knew we had to get him fast. And she said, we acted that quickly. Normally, you go through more of a procedure, but we knew that he was the one we wanted, and we had to get him fast before someone else got him. And that's very un-Washington, if you think about it, where everything has to be, all the dots signed and the T's and everything. We had to get him fast. And that was very, very impressive to me. when you talk about lighting a fire there, I've worked a fair amount in Washington at the opera, not at the Philharmonic, and I've always remarked that it's a very good opera company, the Washington National Opera, but the audiences, in my view, and I know we're being watched elsewhere, including Washington, but I'll say it again, were not good audiences. And by that I didn't mean that they were stupid. But in Washington, where everyone is a political figure or connected to a party, to an embassy, to someone that you're being observed, you don't emote in the way that a fan in Barcelona or Milan or even New York would emote. They're very sort of tense. And I remember that Morella Freni, who I adored, her last opera performance was done not in New York or Milan, it was done in Washington, of a Tchaikovsky opera about Joan of Arc. And I went down there for the performances, including the last one, and I was up cheering and crying and so on, like an Italian New Yorker, and everybody else was... And I thought, don't you understand that you are witnessing history of Morella Freni making her farewell to opera in Washington? And you don't really see audiences yelling bravo at the end of an opera performance. I'm not taking political sides here, but I've seen both Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Antonin Scalia, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich loves opera, but he would not respond. And I asked him, I sat next to him once, and I asked him what his favorite opera was, and he said Rigoletto, and I said, yeah, sure. Why? And he said, because it has good family values. So, and so that's Washington. And I always, and this was before Deborah Rutter got there, and I always felt that when Deborah Rutter, who came from Chicago, elsewhere, but basically Chicago, was really the right person to take that wonderful potential of the Performing Arts Center and turn it into an institution that has meaning and value artistically and politically and culturally in a city that is the capital of the United States and has people from all over the world. And she began making moves that I've noticed a lot of improvement at the opera. Francesca Zambello, who's been in this chair, and then Gianandrea Noseda. And while she doesn't run these companies, she's the person with the vision. And so clearly you were part of her vision, and I'm very happy for that. And everything I've noticed is that there has been a very nice synergy. And you and the orchestra will be here on February 12th at Carnegie Hall.
Correct.
What are you doing?
We present a program which represents the prelude, the ouverture of a more extensive tour in Europe. So we embark in our first tour together. The first one was supposed to be in March 2020 in Far East. We were on the point to take the plane on the 6th of March to go to Japan and China. End of the story, because the pandemic started. Yeah.
Did you have a booking in Wuhan or no?
In Wuhan, I just played the year before with London Symphony. When I recollect that, I said, "Oh my God!" No, and so that is the first European tour. We will go to 10 concerts in 3 countries: in Spain, in Germany, and in Italy. In Italy, we will be present in the La Scala, Teatro La Scala stage. In Germany, we will go to Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Köln. In Spain, Barcelona, Zaragoza, and Madrid. So it's a major tour, but the starting is just this date on the 12th of February at Carnegie Hall, and we will present a Viennese-oriented program. Why Viennese-oriented and not Viennese? Because, of course, there is Alban Berg, the 3 pieces from the lyric suite that Alban Berg composed for string quartet, but 3 movements of the 6 for the quartet has been transcribed, orchestrated by Berg himself for string orchestra. So We will present the orchestra string orchestra version of 3 pieces of the lyric suite. We will have the Korngold violin concerto with James Ennis as a soloist, and in the second half, Eroica, Beethoven Symphony Number 3. Why Viennese oriented? Also because, of course, Berg, Viennese. Beethoven was German, was born in Bonn, but he spent most of his life in Vienna. And Korngold was Austrian, Viennese, and just he left Austria to emigrate here in America because of the Second World War. And it's fantastic, fascinating to see how a composer who, when he came here, started to be a very successful movie composer, because he composed track music for cinema, still composed orchestral music. And this piece, composed in 1953, is one of the most incredibly well-written violin concertos. And Heifetz was one who championed this concerto largely. So that's why Vienna-oriented. And also will show the quality of the orchestra. This is my 7th season. If you don't count the 2 years of the pandemic, I hired 22 new players, and not because I kicked off someone, but because there were vacancies in the orchestra, and we started a serious audition system. And I have to say that the orchestra now is really, really playing at top level. I'm very pleased to be in D.C. at the Kennedy Center with the National Symphony Orchestra. I invite you just to check if what I'm saying here is correct, just to come to Carnegie Hall on 12th.
And to come to Carnegie Hall as well. Carnegie Hall, Clive Gillinson, who's the head of Carnegie Hall, is another person to me like Deborah Rutter, who's a visionary person who takes you along with the vision rather than saying this is what you're going to do. And he tends to have a festival, the theme every year. A couple of years ago, it was migration. This year it's going to be more Vienna, Berlin, and that difficult period between the wars and the cultural expression that happened. And every year it's something else. A few years ago they did Venice, and I was one of the frequent speakers, frankly, that year, because they go all over the city, not just Carnegie Hall. So they'll go to museums and galleries, and for the migration one, they focused on 3 groups, African Americans, Irish and Scottish, and Jewish, and how these groups all mixed in together, and how, in effect, you got Duke Ellington and George Gershwin. If you go to parts of the country western music was a mix of the black music and the Irish, Scottish. And they're fascinating programs, and you're actually part of that series this year. And but in these very days, you are at the New York Philharmonic. And I can say, as a New Yorker who grew up with the New York Philharmonic, that I had hoped that they would have the vision that Deborah Rutter had, and that we would have him here in New York. I don't know if you know this, a number of years ago, when there was a vacancy at the Philharmonic, they asked Claudio Abbado to come and do it. And I lived in Milan for a while and learned from Abbado, and I adored him. And we would have had at that time Leonard Bernstein as sort of the eminent older conductor, James Levine at the Met, and Claudio Abbado at the Philharmonic. But then Herbert von Karajan died, and Berlin got Claudio Abbado. And so these maestros at the very top level, like Gianandrea, are very much in demand. So it's the smart orchestras that act right away. And therefore, we don't have you as much in New York as I would like to have you. But you will be at the New York Philharmonic. You conducted there last night. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having him here. And you're conducting there tomorrow afternoon. I should say the dates, February 2nd tomorrow and February 3rd Saturday. And there are not many tickets left. I think there are more for tomorrow afternoon than for Saturday. But you are conducting a different kind of program of Mozart and Mahler. And the Mahler Fourth. Would you talk about the Mahler Fourth, which is the first Mahler symphony I learned, and how it's a little different, I think, from some of the others?
Mahler 4 is, from one side, is the most classical in terms of structure. And in terms of flow of the music, the most simple, not banal, the most simple, the most consequential. That is at the superficial view. If you dig inside, the orchestration is very expressionistic. So the style is really looking back to the old Viennese school. But there are moments of orchestration very new, very visionary. For instance, in a moment there is a French horn screaming in fortissimo while all the orchestra is pianissimo. And in the tradition of the performance, we try to correct these things. I including myself. Oh, maybe it's a mistake, fortissimo, pianissimo. Let's try to say forte the French horn and mezzo forte the rest of the orchestra, just to make more gentle, more acceptable. But am I more knowledgeable about the music of Mahler comparing with Mahler himself? So in this occasion, probably also because I'm almost 60, I'm less afraid in trying to go back to the sign of the composer. And it's incredible how the music, I conducted several times the Mahler Symphony No. 4, is becoming not tridimensional, more six-dimensional. Immediately, the line is simple, but it's like to be in a dark room, and you have spotlights, very short, very, very quick. And when you realize, you don't know where it's coming from, or if it's blue or red or yellow. But the storytelling is pretty easy. That is incredible, because the first movement is like that. That's why in the second movement, he asks the concertmeister to play with a different tuned instrument, tuned one tone higher, because he wanted to depict or to describe the music in the street from not a professional violinist. So with this kind of very edgy sound. It's incredible, because when I first did the symphony in 1999, I thought that it was a very delightful scherzo. And Mahler said that it should sound like a devil dance. So I was completely wrong. And now I try to emphasize this friction, this edgy element. And also the third movement, which is like a spiritual prayer somehow. There are moments of anguish, a moment of hopeless, with the sliding, the portamento, the glissando in the strings. But the form from outside is theme and variations. Very clean. And so it's a symphony that in its small scale, in its classical form and architecture, has a lot of tensions. And also the coup de théâtre, to finish with the angelic voice that imagine a better world. And at the end, it's like to say a sort of lullaby, to say, oh, sleep, my baby, but you don't know if the baby will wake up the next morning or will be the sleepy, the eternal sleep. And that is also the question mark at the end of the symphony.
So there is this poem, Das himmlische Leben, which is is from the Knabenwunderhorn collection. And I'm not going to read the whole poem because it's very long, but the first lines are, we enjoy the pleasures of heaven and therefore avoid earthly ones. No worldly tumult is to be heard in heaven. All live in gentlest peace. We lead angelic lives, and thus we have a merry time. We leap and we dance, and it goes on and on and on and on. And the soprano, in this case, the wonderful Golda Schultz, weaves a sort of magical tale. And the conductor in the orchestra, at least in my view, join in with that. She takes the lead, in effect. And because it's a voice rather than the musical instruments, it's as if the car turns radically, and Mahler expects you to sort of follow in this new heavenly direction. It's very beautiful. It's very transfixing to me.
It's
a
good journey.
symphony.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
And it's a good symphony if you're not having a good day. It really is. I mean that. Because others of his symphonies, like The Resurrection, is very euphoric. And if you saw the movie Maestro, that's what Leonard Bernstein, Bradley Cooper conducts. And Leonard Bernstein would make that an occasion piece. And there are many people who love the third. I love the first. Other people love the fifth. The thing about Mahler is that you can all have your own symphony. And you can explore them all. And I want to point out a friend of mine is in the back. And he is working on a series called Embrace Everything, The World of Gustav Mahler. His name is Aaron Cohn, a podcast and radio series. And Aaron is embracing the world in that he's talking to all of these musicians and scholars and chefs and everything to understand how Mahler connects and expresses our whole world. So I commend that to you. You also have Mozart on the program, and a very beautiful piano concerto, the number 25, not necessarily performed as much as others of the later ones. We know the 20th, the 21st, the 26th, the 27th, 24th. I like the 23rd a lot. But the 25th is not necessarily the one that I can immediately bring up in my head.
It's a big scale concerto,
Yep.
and in a different key because it's in C major. It reminds me the grandeur of Emperor Beethoven, these big gestures. And in a way is whatever it means Beethovenian. Is completely Mozart, but there is a turmoil underneath that is very, very special. You have to consider that Mozart composed a lot of piano concertos for himself, just to promote himself in Vienna when he moved from Salzburg. So he had the same problem that all the performers we have when we try to establish ourselves in a different country or in a different... He wanted to present himself as a great composer, a great pianist. It's incredible because this concerto has been composed immediately after Nozze di Figaro, just before Prague Symphony. Mozart was very meticulous. He wrote, piano concerto finished the 4th of December, 1786. Prague Symphony finished 12th of December, 1786. It's incredible. And I don't know why. I have a special love for this concerto. I have a special love for the A major, the 23 488. I have a special love for the G major 453. I mean, I love all the concertos, are all jewels. But I have also to tell to you that I was very much impressed by the view and interpretation that Francesco Piemontesi is giving. He and myself, just playing once through the first movement, we could engage New York Philharmonic, that is not particularly famous for Mozart. I mean, is incredibly famous for Mahler. Great repertoire, Mahler, Bruckner, Stravinsky, big. But if you go to Haydn, Mozart, of course they play fantastically well, but I'm saying are not famous for this. They are playing with a transparency that shocked me positively. It's incredible. I really, I could see also the what I call expanded chamber music. So that they are an orchestra, but in that occasion, yesterday, it sounded like a give and take from me, from the pianist, from the solo of the flute. It was an incredible energy going through the orchestra. And talking about Mozart, we also presented the aria da concerto, Ch'io mi scordi di te. That is also important to know because there is 503 is the concerto, K 503 is the concerto, K 504 is Prague Symphony, and Chio Miscordi di Te is K 505. So is 4th of December, 12th of December. On Chio Miscordi di Te is written end of 1786. So probably he composed during having the espresso I had in Salzburg. So in 2 hours he could compose this aria. It calls for a soprano and the piano obbligato. So that was a fantastic combination because I had already the pianist to do the concerto. I had the soprano to do to sing the last movement of Mahler. So we just started the program with this aria with the soprano and the piano involved. So the Golda Schultz starts the concert and finishes the concert like a frame. Because I'm still convinced that the most beautiful instrument is the voice. I can say sottovoce. I can say sottovoce.
So I hadn't planned to ask you this question, but I'm going to. This is, I think, the first time you're conducting in what is now called David Geffen Hall.
Yep.
And
Second time.
it has been...
Second time.
Are you
I
conducted?
did in May. I did Roman Feste Romane.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm asking is because the hall looks radically different.
Yep.
I think it sounds radically different. I'm a subscriber to the New York Philharmonic, but rather than keep the same seat, I've been sitting all over the hall to get different perspectives. And sometimes for Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, I've sat all the way upstairs. Other things I'll sit behind. For Stravinsky, for I think The Rite of Spring, I sat behind the orchestra to watch the conductor. And so I'm getting many different perspectives on the sound of the hall. You, as the maestro, don't get to move around the way I do. What is it like now for you? I'll just add one other thing. You conducted a mostly Mozart concert there years ago where they created they moved the orchestra off the stage. And that was closer physically to what you conduct now. But they only did in the summer for mostly Mozart rather than traditional stage and audience. How does it feel?
I like it. I like it. The difference is not only a little bit, it's really palpable. And not only the sound you get from the orchestra, but also the players between themselves, they can hear each other. In the previous hall, it was difficult for them to hear each other on stage. So I always say that in the previous, what was called Avery Fisher Hall and David Geffen Hall, the old one, I had the impression that I was on stage and when I was attending some concerts that I was in the hall and the orchestra was playing in the Columbus Circle. Because what was very clean but very far. And that's why the orchestra was pushed to play not softer than mezzo forte, because simply they were not was not audible. They had to project the sound. So with this renovated David Geffen Hall, where the sound is helped a lot by the acoustics, for them to forget the way they were used to play, it took a while. Because they read pianissimo and they knew that pianissimo was this. It was not this, because the whole didn't help. Now, comparing with my last visit in May, I really felt the orchestra getting little by little used to these acoustics. So they were really searching for, I also encouraged them to search for some nuances of the sound, transparency. And I can tell you, they are enjoying to explore all these possibilities, new possibilities for them, to listen to each other. Now they can react. Oh, there is a solo of the clarinet, so now I can help, I can enjoy, listen. Before it was difficult for them. So I think this renovation has been also a big starting point for not a renewal of the orchestra. The orchestra has always been great, but just to give the orchestra new possibilities. They are exploring how to communicate to the audience correctly as much that they can, according to the acoustics, to the audience.
So, Julian, we were talking about the human voice. Would you play number 2, which is audio, and then we'll talk about singing? That was Diana Damro from Bellini, La Sonnambula, A non credere mirarti. And you've worked a lot with Diana Damro, who, by the way, is going to be here in New York next week on February 6th. I mention all this because because of the pandemic, because of other reasons, many of the artists who we love, who were part of the Met for a long time, are not necessarily here that often. So we who love this music and these artists try to make a point of hearing all of them. So I'm going next week. So I've spent a lot of days recently listening to Diana Damrau to become reaccustomed to her voice. She was here a number of years ago, and I found that you, Gianandrea, worked with her a lot at the Met. And the Pearl Fishers, Romeo and Juliet, new productions, and on a tour in Japan, Lucia di Lammermoor. And what I love about this particular piece is, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, you, the conductor, have to follow the singer and to some degree understand where the cello will come in, but it's a very different conducting job than even a lot of opera.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I always say that I don't wish to my worst enemy to conduct Belcanto.
You said that to me.
It's far too hard. I mean, I will be too cruel. Belcanto is incredible because when everything goes well, it's because of the singer. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. It is the way it is. It's so difficult to make Belcanto because you are right. You have to be a servant of the melodic tune of the cantante without sounding episodic, erratic. Is a difficult topic. You don't have to allow the singer to do whatever she wants, but you have to make her feel, or he feel, that he is free enough. But you have to have the control. So it's terribly complicated. And the orchestra doesn't like to play Belcanto because it's so tiring. Because, have you listened? To do that sounds so simple. Physically, to do these movements for 7 minutes kills every shoulder. I'm serious. Don't ask to play Sonnambula to the orchestra. They try to escape. Not because they don't like the opera, but because physically it's much easier to play Mahler 6 because you have many different movements. You can do this, you can relax, you can play alla punta. There, no. You have this kind of continuity of the sound. And that's why I've done Belcanto. I love it, but I try not to do too much. Because also for the conductor, it's tiring. It's much more tiring to do this for 6 minutes, like the violinist. Non crede amiro orti. And that's why, as a Belcanto opera, I've done so far Lucia di Lammermoor, and I've done Sonnambula. And when I was music director of the Teatro Regio in Turin, we went on tour in Savonlinna in Finland in a festival, and we were asked to do Norma. And being the music director, I had to learn Norma, Casta Diva, to give you an example. It's incredible also there because it's immensely beautiful and incredibly frustrating. If something goes wrong, you feel that everything is collapsing. Because it's like a silk stripe. When it's breaking down, it's broken. So it's, but when it works, really, you have the impression that you touch the heaven with your finger. But it's so difficult. And also for the singers, because they have this huge control of the breath. It's incredible. It's tough for everybody. But when it works, it's worth it trying. It's worth it trying if you get that result. And that's why you have to make the life of the singer easy without giving them too much room. You know, also what I personally don't like it is when the opera becomes a stop-and-go event. Because on stage everything happens, no? The fermatas where they are not meant to be there, dusty tradition born 70 years ago or even more, and you try to ask why you are doing that. When the answer is why not, is not enough for me. Give me one answer why you do this, not according to the score, because if you don't have a reason, I can give you 100 reasons not to do it. Mm-hmm. But if you give me one reason, I will start to think. There is this sort of laziness in the world of the performing arts where you take for granted what has been done in the recordings without looking at the score. Mm-hmm. You grow up with a recording, and if you don't find that in the live performance, you think that the live performance is bad, because you don't even question yourself if your recording is less good than the performance you are attending. You are just got used to that. Mm-hmm. And I experienced that because I grew up with the piano concerto Schumann recording with Dino Lipatti and Herbert von Karajan. To die for, I mean, not to live for that performance. Incredible. And once I went to attend general rehearsal in La Scala with Pollini and Abbado playing the same concerto. I couldn't find my references. I thought, oh, come on, it's not the Schumann concerto. And that morning, I understood, no, that is the Schumann concerto, approached from a different angle. When you go to a concert, Gianandrea, not performing, to attend, free your mind and be able to accept. After that, you can say, I liked or I disliked, but don't try to find what is in your ear, because you will not find that. What you hear in the recordings is completely different, because also the producers, the Tonmeister, they adjust the level. You can hear woodwinds much better in the recording than not in the concert hall. They say, oh, but the woodwinds are not audible. Hey, come on, it's difficult to make them audible if, or otherwise you have to make the strings playing nothing. So there are different things. What I'm trying to say is, I try not to lose myself the sense of surprise, the sense of wonder, even when I conduct, but especially when I go to attend concerts of my colleagues, because there is always something new that you didn't expect that can surprise you. Not necessarily convince you.
Right.
Not necessarily convince you, but, oh, never thought about that. And you go to the score, oh, it's there. And you think you are an idiot because you didn't see that. And some of your colleagues did. I was like, oh, I have to look more, to spend more time with the scores. It took very long because it was about Belcanto, but I wanted to avoid the answer.
I don't know if 10 years ago right now, Claudio Abbado died. And
10 years,
because I was a student of his and so on, and I happened to be in Italy when he died, not working in opera at that moment. I was the president of a jury to name the best gelato in Italy. And it was done in January in Rimini, which is not a place you want to be in January. And Abbado lived in Bologna. And when I was going from Rimini to Udine with a stop in Bologna, and Italy had had earthquakes and fires and different things at that time, and we had the radio on in the car, and they were reporting on the earthquakes and the fires, especially in Liguria. And then they said, headline flash, Claudio Abbado has just died in Bologna. And I was passing Bologna, and they completely switched to all Abbado performance music as we drove all the way up to Udine. And so I was not the driver because I don't know how to drive. I'm from New York City. And so I was in the back, and I wrote an article that was published by WQXR the next day about Abbado. And I don't know if you were mentioning Schumann. He was studying the Schumann Third Symphony when he died. And he was buried with the score.
The last performance, just 4 months before he passed away. It was one of the last concerts.
Yeah.
Immediately after Luzern,
Yeah.
was conducting in the Musikverein Schumann II. So
Right.
he was really revising restudying all the
Right.
Schumann symphonies.
And it's so interesting when we think of, Leonard Bernstein at the end was Beethoven, but also Benjamin Britten. And what composers go to. James Levine, I happen to know this, was studying Brahms, Berlioz, and Mozart at the end. And it's just very, very interesting how you focus on that when the time is short. But I was going to go from Bellini to my hero Verdi. I know you like him too. But I'm going to switch. We'll go to Verdi a bit later. I'd rather go to a composer who was very influenced by Bellini. So, Julian, if you would play number 10, we're going to look at a video. The people of Zurich were as smart as the people of Washington, in that they got Gianandrea Noseda to head their opera company. And because Zurich is a wealthy city that has money, that gold is not the only gold in Zurich, that Rheingold, they're able, with their small but beautiful opera house, to produce all kinds of wonderful things that bigger theaters would have to do in very different ways. And I have not seen this Ring production. I've been in New York for the past 4 years. And but I love the Ring. I've been to 48 complete cycles, and I teach the Ring all over the world. And what struck me when I watched this video the other day was I knew every moment. And I've seen so many stupid Ring productions in which the director, the interpreter, tries to give a different vision. This one, I knew every single thing happening. Now, the music was from the last opera, Götterdämmerung, but it was set, the action was all 4 operas, Rheingold, Walküre, Siegfried, Götterdämmerung. And so it leads me to ask you, this is, I think, your first Ring cycle, the degree to which you and the director and the team focused on the narrative to tell the story as the story is written by Wagner.
That was our intention, and I'm happy that I found a fantastic partner with Andrea Somocchi, because it tells the story. You know, when you go to an opera and you leave the theater and you start to wonder, what was it about? Who was the good guy, the bad guy? Who died? That means that the opera was not very well told, or the director was emphasizing too much the symbols, symbolize something that you have to use a lot of energy from you just to understand. You have, what does it mean? What is? And here, with all this imagination in this production, the story is so well told. And musically also, I found 3 years before I was offered the Ring, 3 years before I was offered the position of the music directorship in Zurich, I remember that I told Dulce I will never conduct the Ring, because I thought I'm Italian. It's just a completely different scope, a different thing. You have to get to the myth, to have to go to this Germanic amplitude, very wide, very profound, very philosophical. You know, to give you an example, the love duet in Tristan, second act, it lasts 45 minutes. And the love duet in Otello, 2 equally beautiful, is just 8 minutes and a half. That tells how we try to express the same feeling, but we have this kind of synthetic way. And I had just to pass just this kind of, let's say, hurry. You have to tell things quickly. No, let things develop themselves. That's why I never conducted Bruckner. I mean, until 3 years ago. Because now, getting older, I have a little bit more patience. So I let the Bruckner music to grow, literally, little by little. Like, I cannot force a flower to blossom with my timing. I want you now. No, I have to wait. The only thing I can do is just to give water and wait and to hope in a good weather. So sometimes I had to get used to this idea and to understand that all the tensions, the relationships in the Ring are human relationships, even if we are talking about gods, humans, and Nibelungen. But
the underclass.
The underclass, yeah. I mean, it's always related power versus love. Now it's a little bit. I'm not banalizing, but the big story is that, and it's incredible because you have to let the story to develop itself, and you have just to lead this continuous underneath power. Go, go, never stop, go, go. But with the right pace. And I think I found that. I cannot guarantee it's the best ring in the world, but I found for myself the way to go through these 4 operas. Now, until now, I've done one by one. Now I want to see what I can do in May, in 1 week, to do the 4 operas, the 16 hours. I mean, but I'm confident that with the good food and the good rest, I will provide a good result, or at least I try my best. And but the story is well told, and is also very powerful.
Yeah,
you can feel it. You know?
I mean, I knew everything happening, not because of the music, because it wasn't there.
No, that was the funeral march.
Right, that was just Siegfried's funeral. Yeah. And Rhine Journey. But every single gesture, I knew every character based on their costume, and these were not traditional costumes. Based on the makeup, I don't think Wotan had an eye patch, but apart from that, but the ravens were there. Everything that happens in the ring happened in these 5.5 minutes. When I teach the ring, one of the first things I bring up that you addressed is that it's a opera, let's call it one big opera, that is not cognizant of religion. It doesn't mean that it's anti-religion or pro-religion. Wagner wrote very Christian operas like Tannhäuser and like Lohengrin. He wrote very more humanistic operas like Meistersinger. He wrote very mythical operas like Parsifal and Tristan. Parsifal being very Christian, but in a different way. But The Ring, and that's why it's so fascinating to me, it's not about, the laws are laws, and the people follow the laws or they break the laws, but they react to law and what is right. And Brunhilde basically says, we don't have to follow the law if the law is wrong. We have to change the law and do the right thing. And that's a very radical emotion, especially because it's a woman who tries to put the world right. It's a fascinating thing, but it's not, these are gods, but more in the sense of having a pantheon of many gods, not one god. Wotan is sort of the chief god, but he's a weakling, and his Fricka, his wife, is really the one who insists on the law. But anyway, so whenever I've worked with a conductor who for the first time is working on The Ring, it becomes a life journey, and it lives with you all the time. What's very particular about Gianandrea, and I have not had the chance to ask you this yet, is Wagner lived in Zurich for a very long time. And you know, when I, for example, hear Verdi in Milan, it's like drinking wine in the place where the grapes are grown. And in the case of Wagner, correct, he was from Germany, but he was a political refugee in 1849. He fled to Zurich. He lived in Switzerland for many, many years, in Zurich and Lucerne. Long, complicated life, I won't tell it here. He made many trips to Italy. He began writing the Ring cycle in Liguria, but he basically was based in Zurich, and his funding was there. His sense of nature was there. So when you go out to the lakes and the forest nearby, you suddenly can feel Siegfried and that whole natural setting, the forest birds. Everything that he evokes in nature is basically the area around Zurich. And so I'm wondering, did you go out in nature? Did you explore the homes where he lived? Did you think of Wagner, where you were walking in his footsteps as you were building your conducting of the cycle that he wrote right there? I've never asked this of anyone before.
I was fascinated to discover that all the libretto of the 4 operas were written in Zurich, even if the music was written in different places, but basically in Zurich. And of course, I went to see where he spent his first night. Now he's an hotel, but at the time was an apartment of one of his friends that invited him to stay with him. But when Wagner arrived, the friend was not there, so he just was sleeping nearby the Limmat.
Yeah.
And of course, I saw another house, and there you had the Wagner Gasse. There is all the city, I can now recollect 5 plugs in different buildings. Here, Wagner spent 1 year and a half of his life. Yeah, and after that, during the time of Tristan, because you have to know that he composed the libretto immediately, starting from the Götterdämmerung, Siegfried, after that going backward. But when he started to compose the music, he started with Rheingold. After that, he continued with Walküre. He started the Siegfried, the first, until the half of the second act. After that, I don't know if he was tired or he had probably a breakdown.
He had no money. That was the problem.
And but he just to rest, he composed Tristan and Meistersinger. And after that, he went back years later to finish the Siegfried and to complete the tetralogy with the Ring, with the Götterdämmerung. So also I can clearly feel when he restarted to compose, because after Tristan and Meistersinger was not the same composer than the Rheingold. And yet, with all the use, the magic, the stupendous control of the leitmotifs, it's incredible how the sense of unity is preserved. Yeah. But of course, Siegfried and Götterdämmerung in terms of complexity of the orchestration. There is a moment in Götterdämmerung when you have 7 leitmotifs going on in the same moment. As a conductor, you have to make a decision which is the most important. And apparently all are important. But if you make all 7 playing the same volume, you lose the one you have to follow. So there are many things that are challenging the conductor, but also making a connection with. I go back a little bit. Why he said Fred from Bellini to Wagner, because Wagner never composed a Belcanto, but he always said, "I would have dreamed to compose a melody, a tune like Bellini did, the Durk componiert of the melodic tune of Bellini. I will never be able to do it." So that is the connection between the beauty of the singing and the different use of the vocal element in Wagner.
Well, for people who don't know Wagner's music, they think of him as, fat singers singing loud and forever and so on. It's not that. They're occasionally heavy, but that's not the point. The point is that they sing in a much longer line.
Of course.
But with a different conducting than what you were complaining about before with Bellini. And that's what I wanted to get at with you, that I think that Wagner didn't imitate, but he was influenced by the Bellinian line for the voice, but created a whole other conducting underneath that or with it that makes it very different from Bellini. But I always see that influence.
But you know what I said in one interview, and I was quoted with a little bit of funny element, that I said I would like to make a ring, a Belcanto ring. Of course, the Swiss press said, he's going to do a Belcanto ring. And when we did Belcanto, meaning not being the voices treated as instrument. They are still voices. You still have to listen to the voices, even in Wagner. There is no point to cover the voices. It's very easy with Wagner. But if you just make the right balance, you can follow the story, listen. So after this sort of making jokes, the Belcanto ring, no? But I say in a nice way now. After that I said, but it's very transparent, this Wagner. It's transparent because he's intelligible, because he's understandable, because I don't try to cover, to make... my idea as a young conductor was that Wagner should sound muddy. No, you have to emphasize the single lines. That's why he was obsessed with the leitmotifs. And that's why he tells the story through leitmotifs with a fantastic control of the orchestration. And if you make the audience to understand it, to listen, to enjoy, it's incredible because he's engaging. He's not just with some voices coming out and in and out. I'm not criticizing other things, but that was my idea. I'm blaming myself for this kind of really muddy density. No, there are some moments of density, but even in the funeral march, it's so well written. Ta-ta. It's clear, are two gestures. You don't have to mix up to them, but just to identify this, and one after the other create one of the most beautiful music ever written. I consider some points of the Götterdämmerung. I've not done Parsifal yet. Among the best music created from a human.
You haven't done Tannhäuser yet either.
I didn't do Tannhäuser. I know.
Yeah.
No,
That's
but,
some of the most beautiful music ever.
I know.
We could talk about that another time. But I'm going to give you a pick between the Sinfonia by Vespri Siciliani by Verdi or the Preludio from Jordano Siberia. Or we could do both.
No, it's too long.
Too long.
Let them decide.
Okay, do we want Umberto Giordano or Giuseppe Verdi?
Is it a bit mixed? We have to raise the hands, otherwise.
Okay, I'm going to make an executive decision. I adore Giuseppe Verdi. He's my hero. We're doing Umberto Giordano. Because
No, I know.
we've spoken a lot about Verdi, and I've spoken constantly about Verdi. We don't get the chance to speak about Umberto Giordano. And Gianandrea took a very particular opera at a key moment after the pandemic and brought it to life. And it's called Siberia. And so we're just going to play the prelude, Julian. So that's number 7. And it's about 5 minutes long. And then we're going to talk about this opera. So that's an Italian composer setting his opera in Siberia. And I heard a lot of Tchaikovsky in this, all over the place. Did he do that as a tribute, or just because it sounds so Russian?
There is also the use of some folk songs from Russia, of course, particularly in the third act. This is the intermezzo before the second act. It's just intermezzo sinfonico. And yeah, how to, being an Italian, to set an opera in Siberia. So it's completely different weather, completely different atmosphere. We have this kind of sense of extroverted, and there is just gloomy, and you are in the prison, in the lager. So, by the way, the opera starts with the offstage chorus. So you have the curtain opens, nothing happens, there is no one note from the orchestra, and you hear chorus from offstage singing because Pasqua, Easter is coming. After that, on the last note of this chorus, the orchestra starts with this moment of joyful life in a palace in St. Petersburg. And after that, of course, there is a lover with the usual story. But it's incredible how this music also is able, like in André Chenier, like in Fedora, to tell perfectly the story and to find the way to communicate through music the emotions of the characters. And according to what Giordano wrote, Siberia was the opera he liked most about his operas. Whatever it means, but he had a special love for this opera written for La Scala, and at the beginning was very much performed. Somehow went out from the repertoire. So in 2021, I did this production in Firenze. That was interesting, the story, I tell very briefly. Pereira was intendant in La Scala in 2019. We just planned to do Siberia. We had a fantastic cast, Ionceva, George Petean. Okay. He finishes, arrives another intendant, Dominique Meyer. He called me in his office and he's telling me, Gianandrea, we cannot do in July 2021. Who comes to see Siberia in La Scala? It's just a flop. But, yeah, with these singers, with Ionceva, and the orchestra wants to do it, and I'm investing in doing that. No. Okay. And they offered me another opera. I was not interested, so this period became immediately free for me. Where ends up to be Pereira? In Firenze. So when he discovered that La Scala cancelled, called me, you know what? La Scala cancelled. If you want, come to do it in Firenze with the same cast, the same director. Just we move what was meant to be in Milano to Firenze. They said that the period is still free, so why don't we do it? And we did it, and also was very interested also for a company, I don't say because the wife do, and has been also recorded for video, for commercial use. And that is the story. So sometimes you have to find someone who believes in one opera more than a theater, and he wanted to continue to have this dream realized, to become true.
I think Umberto Giordano is one of the most undervalued of composers. And I love his André Chenier.
Yeah.
But I've studied Siberia years ago because I knew that was his favorite of his works. And it's a fascinating work, and it's interesting how much great opera there still is out there that we don't get to see very often for any number of reasons. And it took the series of coincidences and the pandemic. Now, I don't talk to artists too much about the pandemic, but many of them were confined to their homes to study, to do whatever, not perform. You and I spoke via Zoom and video during that period, but what was it like? What did you study and what did you focus on when you were given those 2 years, let's say, that you may not have studied? What changed in your approach to music? during the pandemic?
I don't know what changed my approach to music. What I can say is that I had to reorganize my life. Immediately I became so disciplined. Being a son of my country, it's difficult to be disciplined. So I had this kind of routine that I followed really like an employee. So starting from 11 till 2, lunch, from 3 till 5, stop, playing 1 hour the piano until 6, from 6 to 7:30, read a book. Every single day. And when we finish, one day yes, one day no, with Lucia, with my wife, either to cook a torta, a cake, or to prepare a risotto, or to do something, or to try a wine. But it was difficult because we were not allowed to go out to buy the wine. So that is what I discovered, to be forced to be disciplined. It depended only on me, because I know some of my colleagues, they were on the edge of depression and frustration because they lost. And my first week, I was really lost. But I said, look, this is the time that is a gift in my hands. It's a tragic time, but I have time that is supposed to be used. And I did, in those months, I did 70% of the work on the ring, 70% done. And I learned music that was waiting far too long in my library, so Heldenleben by Strauss, the Miraculous Mandolin Bartók, Concerto for Orchestra, Lutosławski, Siberia, I learned the opera in that period. So I read books, I prepared recipes, and I went back to play decently the piano. And when the pandemic was almost over, I re-lost the piano playing, but I continued to learn the music, but in the hectic way than before, so I didn't learn much. But the approach of music, in a way, was different because I had time. I didn't have to learn a score during the flight over the Atlantic Ocean or in a station. Or a rail station, or traveling, or just stealing 1 hour here, half an hour there, always with the feeling that you don't get ready enough for the first rehearsal. I had time. I thought that I appreciated to have time and to be able to use it and not to waste it. That helped me to be in a sort of discipline, day-by-day life. That helped.
Is there any book that you read in that period that affected you, changed you, perhaps a book you didn't know about?
I read in that period many books. Many. I reread I Promessi Sposi.
By Manzoni, which is set during a plague, and it's set in Lombardy, where more or less Gianandrea was.
No. I read Furore by the Wrath of Grapes, the Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath.
John Steinbeck.
And I don't know if this is true. The Japanese translation, the title was The Angry Raisins. Really?
Yeah. In Italian is Furore.
Yeah.
And I read many things, Émile Zola. I read many, also some Italians, and some South American, so Cent'anni di Solitudine, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Isabel Allende a lot, and Italian contemporary, and so a lot. And that helped also to give me fuel for my music, because I discovered that I was able to conduct music, I was able to get good results from the orchestra, but I was empty. I didn't have content. I mean, I knew the music, but it became dry. Do forte, do mezzo forte. Do piano, spiccato, staccato. And they were happy, but with this, you just feed your curiosity, and the music make more sense. So you realize why the composers spent most of their time tried to fix on paper what they wanted to communicate to us. There is always a need. A composer doesn't compose for money. There is a need. After that, they make their living with that. But there is always a need. If as a performer, I don't try to get the need, what I do in front of the orchestra, I became a robot, an automatic reproducer of music, which I can do. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting for the audience to listen for the 100 times Beethoven 5. Maybe yes, maybe no. But if I try to get inside the score, to have more time to do that, you realize the revolution, the hunger, that was in the heart, in the mind of Beethoven. And you start to think, why those two fermatas in the second bar and the fourth bar? Why? There is no need. So why he put these fermatas? How I should read these fermatas? How I should approach that? Why there are the clarinets together with the strings at the beginning? Pa, 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 only strings and two clarinets. Who are going to listen to the clarinet? No one. But Beethoven wrote two clarinets to double that. And why he repeats the gestures? Pa, 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 pam was not enough, not for Beethoven. Pa, 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 pam. So the first one gives you an uppercut. And when you try to recover, instead of saying, oh, forgive me, sorry, he gives the second one. You are knocked out, and that's, now that you are here, you listen to me. It starts to tell the story. He did the same in a less cruel way with the Eroica. Schaff! Schaff! The symphony starts with bar 3, not with bar 1. Why he had bar 1 and bar 2? To get the attention of the audience. If you do a very good gestures, even today, it's like, PAM! It's like a slap in your face. Mm-hmm. And he repeats always, doesn't do only once. Beethoven is always repeat himself. Pam, pam! Okay, now I got your attention, boom.
So I turned to Michelangelo during the pandemic. I know that many of you know I created a program called Fred Plotkin on Fridays because I entirely stayed in New York in my bedroom for this whole period, and I created this program that's streamed by Adagio, a German music streaming service. And every Friday, I would have someone come into my home, so to speak, via Zoom. Gianandrea early on. My first guest was Thomas Hampson, Christine Gerke, Ben Hebner, Julia Bullock, Fiducio Furlanetto, Manfred Honig. All these wonderful people who you never get 20 minutes with, I would have 2 hours with. And that was my way of nourishing this. But I have studied the life of Michelangelo for many, many years because I find his wisdom, his tenacity, his dealing with adversity fascinating. He had a utopian sense, and I felt I was ready for utopia during this pandemic because it seemed very bleak, and I didn't know. I felt it was going to last a long time. A lot of people thought it'd be over in 3 months. I did not. So I went back to some of his poetry, and because he wrote about his struggles and about his life and art. And Dmitri Shostakovich set many of these poems to music at the very end of his difficult life. So I'm going to conclude by playing Gianandrea conducting, Ildar Abdrazakov, one of the songs for voice and orchestra based on, Stefano's not here, but Stefano, oh, you're there, okay. This is for you, Stefano. It's about Dante Alighieri, okay? So, Julian, if you please, number 12. We have Noseda, Michelangelo, Abdrazakov, and Dante Alighieri.
Видя Халдеева создания, ведь для нее и высший генерал. Будь я как он, будь мне суждены его дела и скорбь его изгнания. Я в лучшей доли в мире не желал.
Normally, I end on something a little brighter than that, but I just thought it was a very interesting work because when you all met Gianandrea Noseda here in 2006 and 2007, he was a very promising, gifted conductor focused on the Italian repertory, and now he's one of the world's top conductors, and he conducts everything with precision, with insight. And I thought tonight I wanted to bring forth the Gianandrea that he has become, who can talk about Bruckner and Wagner and Mahler and Mozart and Verdi and Bellini and Shostakovich. And we began with you playing Gershwin, actually, because you are the head of the National Symphony Orchestra of the United States. And I consider you your friend. I'm very proud of you. I just think it's been such a terrific thing to watch this brilliant career happen, but still that you connect to music and you connect to audiences and you inspire people to want to come to performances of things they may know nothing about just because you're on the podium. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred. That is the best. Thank you so much. Thank you.
What I'm going to do is I'll repeat the question so people at home can hear it, so make it short.
Sure. There is online a person by the name, he calls himself the opera scribe, and he claims that Washington D.C. that aria from Arthur that is the best opera of the aria ever written. Would you agree?
So I didn't quite hear the name of the aria, but it's from Arthur Serse. Okay. That is the best aria ever written, supposedly. Is there any aria that's the best aria ever written?
I have to confess my weakness and my ignorance. I don't know this area, so I cannot answer. But I go to listen to it because now you put some curiosity in my mind. I mean, yeah, of course, yeah. Absolutely. No, I will make some research and I will listen to that. But there are so beautiful areas. The areas I like most are the areas that are not just musically well written, but that they move your heart. And that is, I consider, especially when are within the opera, in certain moment. Because if you take any aria, as beautiful as all the arias can be, but disconnected for the opera, okay, it's good. But in the opera, the result they get is just incredible.
And I would simply add that any aria Rossini wrote is the best aria ever written. Thank you all very much.
Grazie.
Soprattutto dal Raggio Lusinghiero. That's the best aria.